Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am Aaron, and this is the Inclusive Dad podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Diana Fannon. Welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Yeah, for sure. Can you just start us off by telling me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, my name is Diana Fannon. I have a pretty extensive background in working with individuals with disabilities. Primarily, it's been students in the schools. So I started as a general education teacher and then transitioned to working as a bilingual school psychologist. And so I worked with all ages as a bilingual school psychologist. And then I supervised school psychologists. Then I worked in dispute resolution. So I got to work really closely with families when they disagreed with their IEPs. And then I've been a director of special education for this is my sixth year. And then I started Disability Ed Pros a couple of years ago, and that's just been sort of my side passion project, hoping to be able to make that my full time. Again, working with families, helping parents be able to kind of, translate that sort of secret language of IEPs into English. So there's not such a disconnect between parents and IEPs and parents and schools, and helping to kind of level that playing field. That's really what I try to do, and what I tried to do when I was working in schools, quite honestly. So that's the shortest version of of what I do. Oh, and I will add that as of 4 years ago, I am a parent to a child with autism. So that
Okay.
has given me a little view of both sides of the table.
Yeah. So, which of those roles is like your was is or was your favorite as far as like working in the schools?
I it's hard to say because I really, really love working with students, and I miss it.
Yeah.
But in my current role as director of special education, I have learned so much from families, and I love working with families. And I I have heard, and I'm sure as you're a parent of a child with disability, so I'm sure you've been on the side of whether you've heard it or felt it, some of the some of the maybe negative feelings of when you're a very active advocate for your child. Sometimes the schools aren't always receptive to that. Um, so I have learned so much, and I have told my parents, and the parents that I've worked with know this, that I wouldn't have been able to get done what I got done in my district without the parents. And sometimes I learned things from parents before I learned them from research. Like I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, because when I was a school psychologist, I was much more on top of like current research. I just admittedly I had a little more time for it. As director, I wasn't, because I was, I'm working with OTs, I'm working with speech pathologists, I'm working with a bunch of different um, components of special education.
Right.
So I had a parent come to me maybe 4 or 5 years ago talking to me about autism in girls, right? And so I heard about that, and how we really needed to pay attention to the way it presents differently from a parent before I heard about it myself, right? And
Right.
I could have been like, I could have pushed back, or I could have said, no, 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 but I didn't, right? Because my parents were bringing me information that I needed to have. And I'm so grateful, because now I know as a parent that I'm staying current on things for my child, because it matters in a
Right.
not that it doesn't matter as a director, but it matters in a different way as a parent. You know what
Right.
I mean?
For sure. Yeah. So I have a daughter. Her name's Cecilia. She's 22, so she just aged out of the all that
The
school stuff
schools.
last October. But I mean, that was my backstory. Is I don't remember hearing anything about disability or special ed before my daughter was born, so I had to learn it all. And it was just since I didn't know it, I was trusting the school to tell me everything, and then found out after she was sent to like a segregated classroom about inclusion and her being
Yep.
included, and just had to go down that path. And once she was kind of down that path, it was trying to get her back into gen ed more. Was
Yep.
there's these hoops that she had to jump through that she wouldn't have had to if she was there already. So just that
Yep.
whole frustration. And I'm saying the word inclusion, and then the school's agreeing, but then you find out like, okay, my definition of inclusion and yours are not on the same planet. So how do we
100%.
how do we get to that point? So that's kind of where I was coming from. So yeah, just having you know I applaud you for being hearing something from a parent and then trying to find out more information and working with them. I mean, we had a good relationship with our administrator. I mean, we didn't always agree, but at least I knew she and listen, have go along with most of the stuff we wanted to, and just he knew where she stood. So I appreciated that part. We didn't always agree, but you're not gonna always agree with everybody anyway. So just do what you can. But yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that what I've always tried to do, because it's particularly when you work for a school district, you are charged with certain things, right? You're
Yep.
using public funds,
Yep.
you have to do certain things that I didn't
Yep.
always like. The thing I tried to do, and the thing I will always do as long as I work for schools, is to be transparent, right? So what I would always tell my families and my staff, anyone, is that if I can say, yes, I will, and if I don't know if I can say yes, then I will tell you. And I will
Right.
tell you why, and I will tell you, I will get back to you. I will figure out the information, but I will never give anyone the runaround. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's ways to handle things. And I think that honestly, where schools go wrong sometimes is that there is a lack of transparency. There is a lack of communication.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I was perfect or am perfect,
Yeah.
because sometimes we all screw up in that, right? Communication's hard and it takes a lot of effort, and I've dropped the ball. But all we can do is do better, and all we can do is try to apologize or repair, same way we do with our kids, right? Like you see that out there a lot now, is that like if you screw up, you apologize, you try to make it right, or you own it, right? Apologizing
Yep.
isn't even as helpful as trying to make it right. And so I find the same thing with the parents that I work with, the families that I work with, is that if I miss an email or if I miss something, I'm so sorry. This is what it
Yep.
is. This is what happened, and this is what we're going to try to do.
Yeah. Yeah, as a parent, I
So
mean that for sure. That we appreciate that because you don't. Otherwise, you don't know, and then you're guessing, and you go down paths you don't want to go down. So
right. And I've been
uh,
on that side now as a
yeah.
parent, and I have been so fortunate to have this incredible team working with my son.
Yep.
And I sat in my first IEP meeting before he started at his current school was not great. But the second and third meetings where I've had him with his school team have been truly incredible. The last one I cried. Like they were like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, you guys have no idea. Listen, I work in the field, and when you get a good IEP team,
Right.
and good doesn't mean perfect IEP. Good means
Right.
a team who cares about your child, right?" And so there are a lot of different ways to see inclusion in effect and in practice, and it doesn't mean it's perfect, right? Like you
No.
said, your definition of inclusion and my definition of inclusion, like we have to operationalize it, right? What does it look like?
Yeah.
And does it mean you're in a gen ed classroom 100% of the day? Maybe. Does it mean you're there 50% of the day? Maybe.
Hmm.
Does it mean you're connecting with neurotypical peers? Yes. Right? Like, I think we can at least agree on that. But we
Sure.
have to make sure we spell it out and we talk to each other about what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. Exactly. What is your definition of inclusion?
So, I think there's a lot of different ways to talk about inclusion, but I would say that it means that every child is seen, valued, and supported in the same learning spaces as their peers. I would say that we have to make sure that we're not fitting students into existing systems, that we are creating systems to meet every learner's needs.
Right.
Um, and the other piece of it is that we're creating access and belonging.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Can you share a bit about your personal journey with epilepsy and how it has influenced your mission to empower parents in special education?
So, the really interesting thing about my journey with epilepsy is that it wasn't really until sort of midway through my career that I even started to identify as a person with a disability.
Hmm.
Because I didn't, when I was diagnosed, I was 17, I was getting ready to go off to college, and we didn't really have social media. Nobody really talked about things. We didn't share things openly like we do now, or maybe that was just my family.
Right.
But we and so it was really an ongoing sort of battle's not the right word because it sounds too dramatic, but it was we really just sort of went back and forth with how to handle it and how to manage it. I got diagnosed when I was in December of my senior year, and in July or August I went off to college, and so it was really just figuring out how to manage it and keep going. And so I had all kinds of things happen to me over the next probably 10 to 15 years. But as I worked with kids, particularly as a school psychologist, I realized how much I kind of understood when you'd have a child who wouldn't take their insulin. Because I worked with high school kids a lot.
Yep.
And, I wasn't sharing my personal information with them just because that wasn't something I would do usually. Um, Sometimes I would share with their parents. I'd let them know I understand what they're going through, because sometimes the parents would be like, they should just do it. And I would be like, well, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
But with the kids, I would sort of identify with what they were going through and how hard it was to just, or how much they wanted to just be, normal, quote unquote,
Hmm.
whatever that
Yep.
is. Um, but so I would identify with what they were going through, or kids who were missing school because they had to go get blood transfusions for sickle cell, or they had to
Hmm.
go, all the different things that were happening. And I started more and more to kind of understand what my own journey, how it paralleled some of theirs. I didn't go
Hmm.
through it in high school, so that was the difference, but I did in college, and it was
Yep.
really hard. So there were times when I wouldn't take my medication, or I would stay up too late. And so that's really how it started to make sense to me, how I ended up in the job that I ended up in. And it wasn't an accident. It was why it made sense to me. It was why it was so interesting to me. And it was why I was so passionate about helping the families and the children. Um, and so gradually it just became less of a job and more of like my mission, my
Hmm.
passion, the work was work. Of course I needed a job, but it was much more than that to me. And so that's kind of, and then as my epilepsy kind of impacted my life, it, became my own struggles and my own journey to kind of figure out my epilepsy. But it really did impact my work and my work with families. And then I became more and more open about sharing it, because I thought that it was really important that people knew, that
Yeah.
we have kids sharing stuff all the time. We have families sharing stuff all the time. And then particularly as social media kind of evolved and everyone shares everything, it
Right.
became less, it felt less like something that needed to be hidden,
Yeah.
and um, so yeah, so that's it. It really just, it became much more important to the work that I was doing, to let people know that I did understand, what
Yeah.
they were going through.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just you have that experience in your life, and by sharing it with other families, it kind of puts them at ease a little bit too, probably. Because I mean, I my daughter's had seizures since she was 3 months old, so we've been, it's pretty much, I don't remember a time before that. So she's always taken meds during school and all that stuff. So
Yeah,
having somebody, if we would have had somebody on the team that would be like, hey, I also have, epilepsy. I know taking meds and that kind of stuff,
yeah,
and just have it would make you feel a lot more comfortable for sure.
yeah. That's what I found.
But yeah, the schools was always we always had like the Epilepsy Foundation of Minnesota would come in and do education,
Oh, I love that.
with the class and the teachers and the nurses, just we kind of tailed off near the end, but like early on, they would come in every year and just talk to the kids. She has epilepsy. This is what it might look like. This is what you should do, kind of stuff to try to put everybody at ease. So yeah, that was always pretty fun.
Oh, I love that. That's incredible. That's a really great resource.
Yeah. What inspired you to focus specifically on empowering parents in navigating the intricacies of special education, and how do you approach that mission?
So, it's kind of, I think it's a little bit of what I mentioned, but also I would say when I started, I was working primarily in areas that were families who were either low income or Spanish speaking, and or just non-English speaking, primarily Spanish, but sometimes other languages as well. And so what I was learning is that there wasn't always, we talk on the IEPs about informed consent. And I think sometimes there is an assumption that going through a meeting and then talking about things means that the other parties understand. And by other parties, I mean families.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I became very, like, when I was a school psychologist is kind of when this started for me. And it has continued since. So this is what started it for me. Informed consent it's like only 2 words, but they're very loaded, right? Informed really means that somebody understands, right? You're informed in what you're agreeing to, and then consent is the agree part, right? So you're signing a piece of paper saying that you are agreeing to everything we've just talked about. You're agreeing to all of these services, and you think that they're what's right for your child. And then the informed part is that we meaning the school, has done a really good job of making sure that you understand, and you also know that you have other options, right?
Yep.
You know that you can disagree. You know that you can disagree in part. You know that you are a part of the IEP team, right? And so I would see these meetings or be part of meetings where parents would be like, or somebody would just go through and run through presenting.
Yep.
And there would be no real opportunity or no real even in for the parents to share their concerns or to voice their disagreement or to voice even like a wondering, right? To like say, well, what about this? Or the parents would be shut down in a way that wasn't even obvious that they were being shut down, right? It was just this like very uncomfortable or not a like, I think to anybody who didn't know, it wasn't clear that the parent wasn't being like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not, I'm trying to find the words to say it, but it wasn't an open, it wasn't a warm, inviting feeling where the parent could be like, well, hey, what about this? What about this?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've been in those meetings. It seems like you may have had a good relationship with your team, but they felt so uncomfortable. And it's the reason now that like, I don't even like I've supported several families like outside of my day job. And it makes me anxious, even like being in IEP meetings, because they can just feel so, combative, even if nobody's actually fighting.
Yeah. I mean, I would say overall we had a decent relationship with most of the teams, but I mean, my daughter qualifies as severely multiply impaired. So, I mean, I still remember the first time I went to an IEP meeting, I didn't get a heads up, and we went for my son's kindergarten, like back to school conference with us. I mean, me and his mom and him and the teacher, 5 minutes, dropped stuff off to her. What I thought was just going to be the same thing, and there was 10 people on the other side of the table. I mean, walking into a situation where it's one or two parents and there's 10 school staff across from you. I mean, the power imbalance is odd. I mean, even if it's, I mean, like you're saying, it's already imbalanced. It's just by the sheer number of people and how you're sitting. So, it kind of puts
Yes.
you on edge, and then all that stuff for sure. So we had that a lot, and just yeah, I mean, I've had times where I've called them out on stuff and left the meeting because they didn't have a district rep there. The person that what they said was couldn't actually make decisions. I'm like, then we don't have. It's not even an IEP team. Why are we having a meeting? And walked out, and the special ed director was there before I left the building. So I mean, I've had some not fun meetings, but it's for me, and I would do a lot of research. So I mean, even for me doing research, and the other thing that always frustrated me is like they know I'm going to ask questions. So why after 10 years of meetings are we still not like making sure everything is correct? Like, what do you do for
Yes.
people that can't read or don't understand what's even
Well,
happening?
and that's my point, right? Which is
Yeah.
like it is it's baffling to me
Right.
because it's like and then the things that I've heard over the years about the difficult parents, and I'm like, you all have to understand that they are fighting for their kids.
Yeah.
So you have to reframe what you're saying, right? Which is like, I understand how it may feel for you. I know you've got a lot of things on your list, but I we just disagree on what is best.
Yeah.
That's how you have to come at it.
Yeah.
You think one thing, parent thinks another, but it is their child, so they're fighting for their child. So, that's the way for me. It was always so hard for me to understand how nobody else saw that.
Yeah.
And not nobody, right? I'm being obviously I'm being dramatic for sound bites, but I'm actually not. But
Yeah.
but I think that, but it wasn't only me. There were many people who felt like I did, but there were also just so many people who would always say that parents were difficult,
Right.
or they wanted too much. But I was, and for me, it was just hard for me to understand. So this is again kind of my origin story, right? Which is like,
Yeah.
how did I end up doing what I'm doing, or why did I end up being so passionate about what I do? It is this, right? It is that the informed consent piece. It is the
Right.
perception of parent piece, right? Which is I don't understand, right? Like
Yeah.
I never understood why it was hard for anyone else to understand.
Yeah.
Right? Like it baffled me. It still does, right? I've done
Yeah.
this is my 23rd year in education.
Yeah.
And you would think I'm like a naive newcomer who has worked in public schools for 30 seconds, but I still don't get it.
Right.
Like, I understand all the constraints. I understand time constraints. I understand if people are overworked. And so I understand how it may prevent people from being able to do things.
Right.
But I don't understand the perception.
Yeah.
Right? So I still struggle with it, which is why I've always been on, even before because everyone's like, oh, you have kids. I'm like, well, I didn't have kids 4 years ago. I didn't have a kid 4 years ago.
Right.
And I wasn't a different person then.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah, my daughter, she's had 50-page IEPs, 100-page evaluation reports, and that we'd show up to a meeting. Hey, we got an hour to go through the IEP. I'm like, okay, first of all, I haven't seen this thing. I can't read through a 50-page document and process it and come up with questions and be a participant with how well to the level I'm supposed to be in an hour if I'm just getting the document. And they're like, so we need to reschedule. Like, well, it takes a long time for everybody to get here. I'm like, I understand, but I cannot be a participant to the level I feel like I'm allowed to be if I can't read through it and process it. I mean, if that makes me a difficult parent, I guess it does. But to me, it's just like, how are you supposed to, how do I, like you're saying, how do I sign off on something, have informed consent?
What do you want me to do with
I don't
this?
even know what. It's a 50-page IEP, which it's a legal contract between the school and the parents on what's going to happen. Like, I have to read through it and see what it says.
Right.
So it's like, I'm not trying to be difficult. It's just, would you sign it?
I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to read and digest it and have any idea what y'all are talking about, right? Which is my kid.
Yes.
Right. And so that's the piece of it. Like, and so, with draft documents and getting drafts out and things like that, if you really want a parent to be part of the IEP team, which per IDEA they are,
yes,
then why aren't you? Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you like, and again, that's the piece of it. Like, I understand everyone's busy. I understand everyone has a lot of work. I understand all of that, but it doesn't make any sense.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, that's the piece. That's the piece that is always so hard for me. And I've had like, listen, I've worked with some incredible, like as we work, so the district that I'm in now, we've worked to be more inclusive, right? We've worked for the last 6 years on building more inclusive settings. We've moved up from like 57% initially were included 80% of the day, or 80% or more. And then now it's like 73%. So we've made some really good gains. Sure. But it's been hard, right? It doesn't come easily. Sure. But some of that, like when some of the administrators have done a really incredible job, like one of our administrators, he worked with his team to say, we want all of the assessors to send the reports out 7 days in advance to the parents. And I was like, are you sure? And I'm like, because I was like, that's not coming from me. He's like, no, we agreed on it. And I was like, so they did that themselves. Yeah. They set that 7 days. And that's, that I'm like, 5 days is kind of the standard. Like It's not in the law or anything, but because of the, the 5-day record request thing that we have. And he's like, no, we agreed. I was like, oh, if they all agreed on it, then I will support it. Sure. So, but that's the kind of thing that I think when you start working together as a team and working together to support, to get everything done in advance, some of that stuff happens on its own. I mean, not on its own. There was an administrator who was guiding that, a principal who was leading that. And so really good things can happen and people really get things done, and then parents benefit, meaning the students benefit too. Yeah. But yeah, that's the piece of it. And that's why for me, it's always the parents who need to know their rights. And that's what I always see happening, that parents are always behind, not because of who they are or what they know or how smart they are, just because educators know, right? This is, I mean, and not all of the educators, but like, you have a director of special ed, or you have a coordinator, or you have a school psychologist. You have people who like special ed law is what we do. Yep. And so when we're coming to the meeting, we know what our rights are. We know what your rights are, but you may not know. Yeah. And so I feel like my job is to make sure parents know. Sure. And even when, again, I've always tried really hard to make sure that I did that. Like when I was a school psych, I would call parents before the meeting to talk to them about the report and to say, just so you know, this is what's happening. This is what we're going to do. This is what's going to be discussed in the meeting. And particularly if it was like, a first assessment or something, right? If we're like recommending an autism eligibility for the first time, right? Or intellectual disability, or like, usually like learning disability or ADHD under other health impairment, usually that doesn't like shock parents. It doesn't mean I wouldn't talk to them about it, but autism or intellectual disability or emotional disability, which used to be emotional disturbance, those things are a little shocking to parents. So I like to give them time to process that. Right. So I wouldn't just send the report. I would call them on the phone and talk to them about it, because that's a big deal. Yeah. And I didn't want them to hear about it in a room full of 10 or 15 people. And a lot of my parents were Spanish speaking. And so sometimes it'd be a translator, and it's just a different experience than talking to me on the phone about it. Yeah. So, I mean, that was a really long answer to the question you asked, but that is like, parents are they should be the star of the team, because usually we're talking to them because the student isn't like, we can't give the student like center stage yet. Yeah. And if you think about that, like they should be the star of the team, not an afterthought. Yeah, for sure. What is one tip that you can share to just help the listeners be more inclusive today? So just something anybody can do starting today to be more inclusive. To be more inclusive, talk to the student. Like, no matter who the student is, no matter like whether they're speaking, non-speaking, whether they're in a wheelchair, whether they're walking, no matter what child's disability is talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and don't use a baby voice, just use a regular voice. No matter their age, no matter their disability, talk to the student. I can't tell you the number of times I see like voice changes or talking to the aide instead of the student.
Yep.
Oh my God, it's maybe that's my number one pet peeve. I don't know. I've never thought about it, but it's frustrating, and it's frustrating for the kids because the kids know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's my daughter. She's 22. Yeah, she's
Yep.
22, and she goes to doctor appointments, and it's getting better. But the amount of times we've gone to doctor appointments for the check-in, and they look at me to like say what her name and birthday is, and I'm so and I just
Like,
hey, can you tell them your name and birthday? But it's getting better. But it's just like, why would you not ask her first? And then if she can't, then I help her. Like,
right.
it's
Give
like,
her a shot. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had a friend who I asked him when I did one of my TEDx talks. I asked him for like an example, and he said that he has cerebral palsy, and he has a job driving a garbage truck. Does all that stuff, and he says he still, when he goes out to restaurants, when it's time to order, they'll like look at who he's with to like ask for what his order is, and he's like, why? I mean, like, that doesn't even make.
Right?
I drove here, like, I have my own job, I have a job, my own house. Like, why are you asking them what my
So
order
frustrating.
is? It's just crazy. Yeah.
So frustrating.
Do you want to share where the best place is for everybody to connect with you, and maybe share a little bit about your Disability Ed Pro thing and what that is?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Disability Ed Pros. And then I have a website, disabilityedpros.com.
Okay.
So again, I'm working with parents, and I do support in IEPs if somebody needs me. It's not my primary sort of work that I do, but I'm available. I do some one-on-one coaching, some one-on-one support for parents, just reviewing IEPs, things like that. But I am working on, I have a couple of free resources right now that are available. I have an inclusive advocacy toolkit. I'm trying to remember what it was called. So I have that. I have an IEP guide that's been out for a little while that's also free. And then I'm working on starting a membership. So I'm going to have a monthly membership, super low cost. My goal is really just to make everything super accessible and support parents in learning everything they need to know.
That's awesome. Are you ready for the last question?
Yeah.
Do you like spam lunch meat? Yes or no?
I do, but not by itself. It has to be prepared.
Like, how do you like it prepared?
Like in like musubi, like they do like the sort of like the way they do in like a sushi kind of spam musubi.
Yep. Yeah, so I asked that question because I live in Austin, Minnesota, where they make spam and where the spam museum is located. So it's been fun asking people.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So if you want to visit the spam museum, you got to come to Austin, Minnesota.
That's good to know.
That's our but I think I saw last year they had 100,000 people came to the museum, and it's a town of like 25 to like 27,000 people. So we get a lot of people.
That's crazy.
So, yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah. I've never tried it that way, but people keep bringing it up. That's how they like to eat it. I usually slice it up and fry it and have it look like pancakes or something is how we usually eat it. But
okay.
So I need to try it. I need to try it some other ways.
All right. Well, give it a shot.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It is truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episodes. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.